Alright, today I'm going to make this plague mask. I made this out of mostly 5mm EVA foam, some pleather, and some 3mm in a couple places as well. And all these rivet looking things are just thumbtacks, and I textured it with Mod Podge to try to get it to look as much like leather as possible, since traditionally I'm pretty sure these are made out of leather. Alright, so the first step was, in order to make a pattern, I had to make something to pattern off of. So I took a mannequin head and I wrapped a grocery bag around it and then started adding duct tape, and I used paper to make the extension on the mask here. And what I ended up with was I took and cut it right down the middle, and the side that was the nicest is what I'm going to use for my pattern. I cut out this one single piece here, and the second piece of the pattern is here. Okay, and I put slits in it to let it lay flat. And then I took this and cut it out of some EVA foam, flipped the EVA foam upside down, and traced a second pattern on the foam. And it's going to be 4 main pieces total for the main body of the mask itself. I am going to take a photo of this and put it up on the Facebook so you guys can download it if you'd like and do your own that way. Okay, so since this is a tracing of the actual pattern piece, I'm going to want to cut on the inside of the line, not on the outside of the line. I want to follow this inside line here so it comes out as exact as can possibly be to the other pieces that I initially drew. And to cut these out, I'm just going to use a pair of scissors. Now they're really sharp, so I don't have to worry about jagged lines, and I also have a pretty steady hand with it. But you can also use an X-Acto knife. In fact, that usually works out better, provided that your X-Acto knife is razor sharp. Alright, so here I have all 4 pieces cut out, and I want to point out here that I did cut most of the pieces on a bias, which just means on an angle. But even like the centerpiece here, even though it's cut on an angle, it's really not enough of an angle. And this particular top part of this whole beak looking piece here, I'm going to have to take a Dremel to, because this is going to have to be a much more extreme angle whenever I contact cement these two together. But first, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by gluing the main part of the mask together to get an idea exactly what I need to do with this. And the first things I'm going to glue together are going to be these V's here. And when I glue them, I'm going to glue them so that these edges you can see are off. They need to be glued so that they're flush. And that's going to help put the curve in it. And I'm also going to glue this centerpiece here. I'm going to do that on both of these. And I'm going to use some damp weldwood contact cement. Alright, so here you can see the difference between the one that I've glued together. It gives it a good amount of curvature and shape without even using a heat gun or anything on it to smooth it out yet. It already looks pretty good. So I'm pretty happy with what I did with this pattern. It's come out pretty good so far. Now the next thing is I'm going to glue this other side. And I just filmed it at this point so you could see, the finished versus the unfinished. But yeah, I'm going to go ahead and glue these together, and then we're going to attach the bottom pieces. Right, I glued the bottom together and just mashed them up as evenly as possible, and you can see once again from the pattern I already have some subtle shape here that'll give me something to work with the heat gun. And next I'm going to match up and glue together the 2 center pieces. Right, there it is so far. Now I just need to add on these pieces next. But in order to do all that, first I have to take a Dremel and sand this down. You don't need to use a Dremel to do this, but if you hand sand, it's going to take forever. One thing in the process of the cutting, you could always use an X-Acto knife. Like I say, I use scissors. You could always use an X-Acto knife. And if you're real good with it, I suppose you could get it at an extreme of enough angle that you wouldn't have to do any sanding. But I'm probably going to have to sand this to get this to all fit in right. Alright, here's how they look after I sanded them down to more of an extreme angle. You can see it's pretty steep, but I want to have some room to work with and to be able to reposition them if needed. Alright, I've gone ahead and glued this together, and I started to use a heat gun to heat the foam and put some shape into it before I glue this top beak part to the actual mask itself. Another place I heated it and put some shape was on this underside here, because it was very straight and I needed it to have a curve. So that's looking pretty good. And you'll notice here also, you see the foam's a little shiny and discolored there. I used the heat gun here as well to help smooth out some of the angles from gluing this together. And you can see they're pretty smooth. I am going to still have to go through with a Dremel and sand this, but yeah, still, you know, looks pretty good. And whenever I glue this together, I'm not even going to try to attempt to contact cement both the top and the bottom. It's just not going to work. Or I'm not good enough to do that. You can take that however you want. What I am going to do is I'm going to contact cement from here all the way along this top edge here to the other corner, to that part of the mask as well. And you can see here I've already put some contact cement on it. And I'm going to glue the top part from corner to corner together. And the bottom part, I'm just going to put some super glue on to attach it. Alright, so I got this glued on, but it was basically just hanging on by a thread. However, it did create a nice channel for me to just run some hot glue on the inside here and help seal it off. And I haven't glued the bottom on yet. I'm going to run some super glue along this edge here on both sides and then simply press it in place where I want it and glue it together. Okay, now that the main body's all glued together, move on to the eyes here. And this is just pushed in place. I'm ultimately going to glue it in there with some hot glue, but here it is for right now. And what I did was I took a piece of cardboard tube that was a little smaller than the hole, and I took some black 5mm thick EVA foam, and I used some contact cement, and I just contact cemented the black foam to the cardboard. And then I took a heat gun and heated the outside of this, which helped seal up the foam so it won't absorb as much paint. And now I'm going to go ahead and stick this other one in, make sure they're both even, and then go ahead and glue it from the back side with the hot glue. Alright, so I went ahead and finished sanding all this, and just use a 320 grit sanding block to help smooth it out. I did run a heat gun over everything, and I also cut this little piece here out of 3mm EVA craft foam, and I got the half circle just by placing a cup on it, drawing a line with a Sharpie, and then just cutting it out. And then on the back side here, this isn't for me, so I had to have the person around to see exactly how to pad it. So however you want to pad the inside is up to you and how you want it to fit your face. This pad here and this pad here is to match the person's cheeks, and this here is to match their forehead. It's pretty close to me, but it's a little bit loose still. And these pads you see up at the top, these three are actually just to help it hold its shape. And I just glued all these in with super glue. Next, what I'm going to do is add a few more things, like I'm going to add some straps to it and some fake rivets, and the fake rivets are just going to be thumbtacks. Alright, now that everything's glued in, there's just a little bit of bumpiness along these seams, so I'm going to use my Dremel rotary tool. I have a sanding attachment on the end of it, and I've got the speed set to about 15. Okay. Okay, and you can see that's already started to take some of the point out of it. You can see over here there's still a point. Now you don't need a Dremel for this, you can hand sand this. And the truth is I am going to be hand sanding this whole thing. Once I get these broad points worked out, I'm going to take a 320 grit sanding block. I'm going to sand over this whole area to smooth it out. So you don't need a Dremel to do this. I just do it because it saves a lot of time and it's easier. Also, this was an awesome gift that somebody gave me, so yeah, I'm going to show it off and I'm going to use it. Alright, so the next thing I did was I put these straps on, and what I did was I took some 3mm EVA craft foam and I just cut out a piece and I contact cemented it to the back of this rather thin pleather, but it had a really cool texture. And this wasn't so much my choice, but the choice of the wearer. They wanted it to tie in the back, very much like a masquerade ball mask. So there's going to be various different elements thrown into this. If you want something that doesn't so much look like that, I would suggest using an old belt or maybe some thicker, heavier duty pleather and just having a Velcro enclosure, or with the belt you could actually use the end with the actual buckle and the holes and put it on your head that way. Probably wouldn't be the most comfortable, but it would look pretty burly and pretty old school, I think. Alright, so now that that's done, the next thing I'm going to do is start adding a rivet effect, quote unquote, and what I'm going to use for that is just some brass plated tacks. I'm going to start inserting the tacks here like rivets. Okay, now that I got my sanding done, I'm starting to put a couple rivets in here just to see how they're going to look and show the person I'm making this for and make sure they're going to like it. And all this white stuff here you're seeing is Mod Podge. I am using a very, very soft bristled brush. You need a soft bristled brush to, oh man, that's hard to say. You need a soft bristled brush to do this part of it. A stiff one just won't give the same kind of texture and effect. All I'm basically doing is I'm taking my brush and I'm dipping it into the Mod Podge, and you need a pretty generous amount on it, but not too much. And then I'm just taking that and I'm just kind of dabbing it all over. And this is for two reasons. One is to seal the foam, obviously. The other one is to provide a texture that will make it look not like foam, more like leather or something. And also the fact that this is going to help hide these seams. I don't want to silicone all this. Seems unnecessary, especially since there's going to be a head wrap and a hat. And the hat, I know at least, is going to cover to here. So I don't want to go through and do all that work, quite frankly, since you're not going to see this. And if I end up borrowing this and wearing it for whatever reason, I will be wearing a cloak with a hood, which is also going to cover most of this. So, yeah. Okay, so here you can see the type of texture I got from doing that. And this is 4 layers to get that type of texture. Now, around the goggles, I just did straight brush strokes, because these I think I'm going to weather to look like old brass. And you can see here too the texture. Hopefully, I'm hoping it's going to look at least a little bit like leather, since that's what I'm trying to emulate here. And I've started putting in some more of the tacks. And each one of these tacks, before I insert them, I take and on the very tip of them, I just dab a little bit of super glue. And that helps to hold them in place. I don't want these falling out on the floor and like me stepping on them or somebody else stepping on them. That would be really lame. Alright, so now that everything's dry and I've got all my thumbtacks in it, I am going to start painting this. And I just used some black acrylic craft paint and painted by hand over the goggle areas, so it has the brush strokes and the lines and the grain in it, because I'm going to make that look more metallic and I want it to stand out from the rest of the texture. And to paint the rest of this all black, I'm going to use some Creatix Opaque Black that I mixed with some 40-30 polyurethane mix additives, it's a balancing agent. And I loaded that up into my airbrush here. And I'm going to go ahead and paint this, the entire thing, all black. Alright, so I finished airbrushing it, and I made the lenses and the little lens covers, and I didn't film this, it was pretty simple. All I did was I took some 3mm EVA foam that I had lying around, and I cut out a couple of circles, about 1 millimeter big, than the actual port itself. And as far as the clear lenses, I just used some packaging plastic that I had lying around, and I just cut a couple circles out of it, a little bit bigger than the inside hole that I cut, and I just sandwiched them together as super glue. Now I'm going to brush paint them with some Mod Podge that I mixed with black acrylic craft paint, and I'm going to use a rough bristled brush. This is pretty stiff. It'll put some nice lines in it. Once I get that all painted black, I'm going to dry brush on some Model Masters Gold. Alright, so you can see I've already started it here, but what I'm doing is I'm taking my brush, just getting a tiny little bit, not very much at all on the end of it, and then just simply going in and lightly dabbing on it, just to give it kind of a rough, tarnished, brassy look. Alright, so here it is now that it's all painted, and I feel like it came out pretty good. I like the texture. I think it has kind of a leather effect and feel. I think I did good with that. And yeah, this now has something to separate the mask and to make it pop. And yeah, now all that's left is to try it on. Alright, I hope that you guys enjoyed this video and this helped out with your Halloween and or cosplay project and gave you some ideas. And as always, thanks for watching and have a great day.